Good morning. If I were to say stroll about downtown and just ask a question of random people on the streets, what would you say Christians are known for? What do you think I would hear? Loving, compassionate, selfless. My guess is you're probably thinking of other words to describe Christians, like hypocritical, judgmental. Barner Pew Research folks, the people that study American religion, have put out information that says 87% of non-Christians would describe Christians as judgmental. It's high. Of course, there's probably a good reason why. Whenever I see a minister depicted in the movies or television, I usually cringe because typically I feel like the minister is depicted as a goofball or hypocritical or judgmental or worse, a hypocritical goofball, both. Today, James, in his letter to us, he is speaking hard about not being judgmental. And the book of James is a challenging word. And I do hope in your own devotional time, you'll take some time to read the entire letter, start to finish. It is a powerful word to us. And as we read James, we should always keep in mind that faith is a journey, a lifetime journey of continuing to seek and grow and deepen our walk with Christ. One of my favorites, Father Gregory Boyle, he says that life is continuing to take the blindfold off. Each of us are called to continue to look within our own hearts to see how we can deepen our faith, this lifetime journey. And here is James' challenge to us today. It's James chapter 4, and I'm going to read 6 verses. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers and sisters. Whoever speaks evil against another or judges another speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and to destroy. So who then are you to judge your neighbor? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such town and spend a year there doing business and making money. Yet you do not even know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wishes, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it commits sin. Now, one of my favorite church jokes is one I have told you before. So if you already know the punchline today, just laugh along with me at the end here this morning. Because I wanted to tell it because I felt it fit perfectly. There was a woman who was watching some new neighbors move in next door, and she was glued to her window, watching them get all their furniture out, looking at their possessions, trying to size up the quality of these new neighbors. Will they take care of the place, or will they run down the neighborhood, as she feared? And so it was no surprise to her a few days later, her new neighbor was putting up laundry to dry in the backyard. And this woman sat at her back kitchen table and looked out her window at this new neighbor hanging up her clothes, and she said, look at that. I knew it. They were those kind of people. That clothes are still dirty. They are just, you can see spots all over them. They don't even know how to do laundry. We're doomed. There goes the neighborhood. Well, next week goes by. She looks out her back kitchen window. She tells her husband, yep, there we go again, still dirty. These people just don't know how to take care of things. They must be filthy. Well, third week comes around. They're hanging up clothes in the backyard, and the woman sitting at her back kitchen table looks out her window, and she says to her husband, well, what do you know? the clothes are actually clean today. I guess someone showed them how to do laundry and to make things actually clean. And her husband said, "No, I just washed our back windows." Thanks. When it comes to telling people of faith not to judge others, we know that James is just one of many voices in Scripture that talk about this very thing. There are other examples I could point to. Paul's letter in Romans says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Of course, we can't forget when Jesus reminded people that be sure to take out the log in your own eye before you point out the splinter in somebody else's eye. Or John chapter 8, one of my favorites personally. I think if I only knew this one story about Jesus, it would be enough to make me a Christian. John chapter 8, woman caught in adultery. Angry mob has got this woman. Of course, it takes two to tango, but they've just got her. And they bring her to Jesus and are ready to stone her to death, as the law would permit for this sin. You know, I'll never forget when I went to Camp Kumbaya, beautiful Camp Kumbaya, decades ago, when I was an intern here. I still remember at that camp that week, the high school students were acting out this story, this very story in John chapter 8. And I'll never forget that the boy playing the role of Jesus, when he got to this part in the story where Jesus is drawing in the dirt. Do you remember that part in the story? He's drawing in the dirt. What this young boy did is he drew a line in the sand. That's what he pictured Jesus doing for them. Drawing a line in the sand between us and them. And the truth is, we like to think that we are nothing like that primitive group of angry mob people with stones in our hand. We'd like to think we are nothing like those people. But if you just, in their defense, for just a moment, in their defense, can I just say, it feels good to be right? Doesn't it? To see and know the error of someone's ways. It feels good to be right, to say, "I told you so," to hold on to that smooth, cool stone of superiority in our hand and to know that we are better than someone. And if we're honest, I think that judging really is less about helping someone see the error of their choices and more about us, how it just feels really good to know better. Like every time I see someone wearing a Duke University t-shirt, I think, oh, poor people. When I see children wearing Duke shirts, I think, oh my gosh, child abuse. Come on, Kentucky fans, we know. We know what it is to feel superior over someone, don't we? We do. And it feels good. It feels good, that feeling. But to go back to that woman and that angry crowd and Jesus drawing in the dirt, how does Jesus diffuse that situation? Well, he says, go ahead and throw the stone. Just make sure you're without sin first. He challenges each of the people to look within their own hearts, to have humility about the reality and presence of sin in their own life. And one by one, the people drop their stones and walk away. And I always imagine that Jesus had a little smile on his face when he asked the woman, "Woman, did no one condemn you?" She says, "No, they didn't." He says, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Jesus challenges that angry crowd to start by looking within their own hearts. You know, I remember listening to a radio interview. It was about an anniversary date of Hurricane Katrina, and they were having people share their stories of their experience through that horrible time. And a woman being interviewed talked about how she was a single parent with 2 kids, and she had a great job. She actually worked for the city of New Orleans. And because of that, she had stayed very late into the midst of the crisis to be a part of the city staff. But at some point, she decided she had to go, and she and her kids drove to Dallas. But her bank was completely underwater, and she had no cash and no access to her cash, and she did not have credit cards. And she said for one full day, she was at Dallas in a Kmart parking lot with no money for anything. And she begged in the parking lot for people to help her. In fact, she shared a memory of a very kind man who went into the store and bought her some things to help carry her through for the day. And she said, I know people in that parking lot looked at me that day and thought I was just some drug addict mother using my kids as pawns. And then she paused for a really long time, and she said, I know that because that is what I have thought about other people. James says, who then are you to judge your neighbor? He goes on to say, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such town and spend a year there doing business and making money. Yet you do not even know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wishes, we will live and do this or that. So after telling everyone, hey, don't judge, get off the judge's bench, James immediately follows that up by talking about how we are to make plans in our life. He says, when you make a plan for next week, don't say, we will do this. Say, if God is willing, we will do this. You're a mist. You don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring. And it might seem, in fact, when I first read this, I thought, wow, James is just throwing out advice left and right. They don't even seem connected to me. But actually, the more I thought about it, the more I realized these 2 pieces of wisdom are actually very much connected. Because first he says, don't judge your neighbors. And then he says, don't go around making plans about next week when you don't even know if there will be a tomorrow. To do both of those things, you need humility. To see our lives with humility. James says, you don't actually have a say in your tomorrow. Tomorrow, for you and for me, is a gift. Have humility. And we don't get to know everybody's circumstances in life, and so you don't need to judge someone. Humility, remembering who you are, and maybe more importantly, who you are not. God is God, and you are not. To remember who we are, humility. That's actually not a popular word these days, is it? You don't hear that talked about much in public circles anymore. To say humility is a value, an important value. Of course, humility, I've always heard a definition of humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. James knows that when it comes to the greatest commandment, to love our neighbor, greatest commandment, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, the greatest 2 commandments. James knows it's impossible to love your neighbor when you're busy judging them. It's impossible to love your neighbor when you're busy making a list of all their errors and mistakes. So the next time you feel yourself starting to climb into the judge's bench and wanting to make a judgment upon someone's life, what if you started with a place of humility, including being mindful of what you know and what you don't know, but most importantly, ask God to help you see that person as you see them. Just let that be your prayer. God, help me to see the person through your eyes. They're broken, they're imperfect, they're flawed, they might even be annoying, but they are loved and held to by the grace of God, fearfully and wonderfully made, just like you, just like me. God, help me to see this person or situation as you see them. I want to close today with some words from one of my preaching heroes, Fred Craddock. He wrote these words towards the end of his life, and Fred was a legendary preacher in the Christian church, author, professor at Candler Seminary in Atlanta. And this is what he wrote. He said, "When I was in my late teens, I wanted to be a preacher. When I was in my late 20s, I wanted to be a good preacher. Now that I'm older, I want more than anything else to be a Christian, to live simply, to love generously, to speak truthfully, to serve faithfully, and to leave everything else to God." Amen.